What's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR. Welcome to another episode of The People's Questions, where I answer all the questions that you guys have sent me over the past week. We got a pretty interesting episode. There's like quite a lot of comments from the last one, and so there was a lot of questions that were just kind of all over the place, and some of them I was able to answer in the comment section for the last video, and I think the better set of questions I have here. This thing are full simple. The first question comes from Cassie J. Williams. He wants to know, what are my thoughts on Chris Tucker? I think he's a pretty funny comedic actor. I wish he did more, because outside of, I think, the first Friday movie and The Fifth Element and the Rush Hour films, that's really all I've ever seen him do. And he, I've heard that they're currently going to be doing a Rush Hour 4, so I think he's got a lot of talent. I just wish he would flex and try doing more things more often, because he kind of just disappears, and every once in a while he comes back and like, oh yeah, I remember Chris Tucker. But yeah, I've always, I would say I'm a fan of his. Next question comes from Allure Cerna. You want to know, why do I hate bugs? I don't hate bugs, I just kind of have a fear of bugs, but it's not like a paralyzing fear. It's kind of more of like an initial shock fear. Like if I see a bug from like 10 feet away, I usually don't freak out, but if I like turn around and like there's a bug that's like within like 2 or 3 feet of me, or it's like really close to me on the ground, I'll have like an initial like freak out first, and then I'll just kind of calm myself down and then try to move on from there. But yeah, I don't hate bugs. Next question comes from JBat. You want to know, do I think that Megalodon shark will ever make an appearance in the Jurassic Park movie? I don't know. I didn't even go watch the most recent Jurassic World film. I wasn't really interested. Not interested in seeing the Meg shark movie that just came out. I'm not interested in seeing that. So as it stands right now, JBat, I honestly don't care. If they put it in, okay, but I have no interest in it. Next question comes from Mr. Abel Z. You want to know, does my brother have a social media profile that I can contact? Yes, he does. No, I can't give it to you unless I ask him for permission first. So yeah, maybe if you catch him in the stream and you ask him and he says it's cool, then I can tell you. But I mean, if people really want to find him, you could easily find him on my Facebook. Just go to Facebook, look at my friends list, you'll see him, and then click on him and then ask for a friend request and then tell him who you are. So that's, the kind of 2 ways you could find him if you really want to. Next question comes from Silver Lionheart 2099, and you want to know, this question has 2 parts. What is my favorite aspect about the Final Fantasy franchise, and which of those aspects would I use if I made my own game for a franchise? It's obviously the story. Story is key. Story is everything. If you don't have a good, compelling, and straightforward story, even if it can be having a couple of twists and turns and a couple of elements that are a little bit off, if you don't have a good story, you're just not going to have a good Final Fantasy game. And Final Fantasy was the definitive franchise that made me a story-driven gamer to this day. So obviously that's the one aspect of Final Fantasy I would like to take and put it in my own game if I ever decide to make one. Next question comes from Red Hood 947. You want to know, who do I want the main character of Resident Evil 8 to be? I don't know. I don't even know if they're going to do a Resident Evil 8. I did not play 7. I don't want to ever play 7. My biggest problem is that I just didn't feel like it was a sequel to 6. It felt like it was a reboot. And heck, if they had just made it a reboot, that's perfectly fine. But the way the game was structured, it just does not feel like a sequel to 6. And so if they did 8, I don't know who they're gonna pick. They could pick a new character for all we know. Heck, if they ever even added like a familiar character like Chris or Leon, if they stick with that first-person shooter gameplay style, I'm just not going to play it. I mean, outside of the 2 on-rail games, which are Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles, I don't want to play a Resident Evil game in first-person point of view. I just don't think that works for the Resident Evil franchise. I don't think it ever has. I mean, that's just my opinion. I know that some people enjoyed 7, but that's not how I want to play a Resident Evil game. Next question comes from Virgil the Son of Sparta. You want to know, if I met Dante or Virgil, what would I ask them? I don't really know. I guess if I met Dante, I'd ask him, you know, where's a good pizza parlor I could find, and I guess if I met Virgil, I would ask him, how do you keep your hair stood up like that without any hair gel? Because I don't know how he does it, because, you know, if you play the first fight and they're fighting in the rain, you know, Virgil's hair comes down and he looks completely identical to Dante, and the only difference between the two in terms of their looks is that Virgil just, you know, I guess took some water and pulled his hair up. But my question is, how do you keep it up like that? So yeah, I guess that would be the kind of questions I'd ask. Next question comes from Venom Rules All. You want to know, if I could pick, what 3 Final Fantasy games would I like to be remastered like 7, and why? If I could pick 3, I'd pick 5, 8, and probably 10. I think 5, I would pick 5 because I think having only 5 characters to work with, I think the story would be pretty easy to follow, especially with the open world format. I'll pick 8 because I think that 8 needs a serious graphical update, and you know, that's just, I think, the obvious choice. And I would pick 10 because 10 is my all-time favorite Final Fantasy game of all time. So heck, why wouldn't I want to see it get updated? I mean, it's been updated in terms of its graphics, but you know, have a full remake of it. Sure, I'd be open for that anytime. Next question comes from Santiago Scarpino. You want to know, if there was a game with the best story in any form of media, however the game itself was really bad in terms of gameplay, would I play it? So basically, if there was a game that had a good story and had terrible controls, would I play it? Depends on how bad the controls are. There are limits, because I've openly admitted that I do believe that Resident Evil 2, in terms of story, is a fantastic game. The problem is that the controls are literally some of the worst have ever existed in the history of gaming. And what's even worse is that they were intentionally programmed to be bad. The developers of the original 3 games have been on record saying that. They made the controls that bad because it added to the overall experience. And so one of the enemies that you would have to contend with was not so much any enemies in the game, but it would be the camera and the controls themselves. And I don't care if that had positive input, or, you know, if people were able to adapt to it. That is a very, very stupid thing to do. There is no excuse to pulling that off. And that is why I have never been able to actually play Resident Evil 2, even though I know that it probably is a really great game, which is why I'm really looking forward to playing the remake when it comes out next year. That's like the one game I would like to have be updated for modern day gameplay style, and that's exactly what they're doing. I finally have a chance to play Resident Evil 2 in a format that I want. But because the controls were literally the worst controls in existence, that made there are limits. Now, I have played some games that have really difficult controls that had a somewhat decent story, that, but yeah, it varies from game to game. The next question comes from Will Williams. You want to know, are there any characters from any video game, anime, or movie I think could beat Sora? I'm sure there are. I mean, when you go into anime or movies, you're jumping to a whole different realm of scaling. I mean, if you put Sora up against like a Dragon Ball Z character like, I don't know, Beerus, I can't really see how Sora would stand up to someone who literally can wipe you from existence with a single word. Or, I don't know, like, I don't know, just several, like several OP characters, like Superman, like, I don't know, like maybe like someone like Superman. It's like, yeah, Sora has magic, which Superman is vulnerable to, but how in God's name would Sora fight against someone who can move at 10 times faster than the speed of thought? So yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of characters in other medias that could beat Sora, but I think some people are just asking, why don't I use Sora in a versus series? I just don't think that there's anyone that I could properly analyze in a versus matchup I think could beat Sora. It's simply that. There's plenty of characters I think could beat Sora, but just in the context of a versus matchup, I don't think I can think of anybody who really could stand a chance. And the last question of the episode comes from Phantom Cities, who wants to know, what do I want from God of War 5 in terms of storyline and improvements to boss battles? In terms of storyline, I simply hope that there's a times jump and we're dealing with like a teenage, like a teenage Atreus. And I guess in terms of boss fights, I would just hope we would have much more bigger scale bosses instead of them always being so small. I would say the closest thing we had to that was like that one dragon fight. Like, add in 2 or 3 more fights like that that have like interesting elements to the overall or the structure to how the boss fight plays out, and I would be very, very satisfied. I mean, that was just one of my biggest problems. It's like, it just felt, compared to older games, the boss fights just felt very, 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 very small. I mean, they were challenging, yes, but it was meant to adapt to the new form of gameplay, which is a good thing, but I'm just saying it just made the game, in terms of combat and boss fights, just feel really, really small. That was just one of my own small complaints. And with that, those are all the questions that you guys have sent me over the past week. I'd like to thank all of you guys that made this episode possible. If you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below. But make sure you get them into me before next Wednesday, roughly around noon, before I start filming the next episode. Like always, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.